The day a cop slapped me outside my own courthouse, he had no idea I was the one who would end up sentencing him, and not just him, but the way our whole city thought about justice. My name is Keisha Williams. I am a black federal judge, daughter of a mailman and a teacher, and for most of my life I honestly believed that if I worked twice as hard and followed every rule, the law would protect me the way I tried to protect other people. Atlanta, Georgia. Monday morning outside the Fulton County Courthouse, the air was already heavy with heat and paperwork. Lawyers were speed walking up the stone steps with coffee in one hand and anxiety in the other, and I was just another face in the crowd because my robe was hanging in my chambers and I was dressed like any other woman headed to work. Gray blouse, black slacks, sensible shoes, old leather briefcase stuffed with files I had been reading since 3 a.m., including one thick internal affairs packet on an officer named Luis Martinez. I was halfway up those steps when I heard it behind me. "Ma'am, stop right there. Not curious, not polite, just a command tossed like he owned the ground under my feet." I turned and saw him step in front of me, mid-40s uniform. Crisp shoulders squared, the kind of cop whose badge feels less like a responsibility and more like a crown. And behind him, two younger officers, Thompson and Rodriguez, hanging back with their hands on their belts and that bored little smirk that says they think they're about to watch a show. I gave him the same calm smile I give nervous jurors. "Good morning, officer. I'm heading inside for court," but he wasn't hearing any of that. His eyes swept over my hair, my skin, my clothes, and I could feel the verdict land before he opened his mouth. "Identification," he snapped like the word itself was a threat. "Of course," I said, reaching for my briefcase. "It's just in..." His hand sliced the air in front of my face. "Don't move," he barked loud enough for everyone on the steps to hear. The two behind him chuckled. "You people think you can just walk in anywhere you want, huh? You know that phrase, you people, how it comes wrapped in a lot of history, a lot of assumptions, a lot of things nobody has to say out loud, because we all already know." I kept my voice even, because that's a skill you learn early when you grow up black in this country. "I'm not sure what you mean, officer. This is a public building." He gave this dry laugh, shook his head. "Public for who?" "You folks from across town." "You lost or something," Thompson snorted under his breath. "Probably another protester." I felt that little burn in my chest, that line where dignity and patience start wrestling, but I held my ground. "Officer, I work here. If you'll just let me show you my..." He stepped so close I could smell his coffee and whatever cheap cologne he'd put on that morning. "Work here doing what he asked, cleaning the floors." Those 4 words landed heavier than the badge on his chest. Not because there is anything wrong with cleaning floors. My mother scrubbed classrooms for years when the district cut the budget, but because he knew exactly what he was doing, shrinking my whole existence down to the stereotype he liked best. People on the steps slowed down. Some actually stopped watching, sensing something was wrong but not wanting to be the one to step in. The courthouse security guard by the metal detectors glanced over, took in the uniforms, took in me, and then looked back at his monitor like it suddenly got real interesting. I straightened my shoulders anyway. "I don't appreciate your tone, Officer Martinez. I'm going to reach into my bag and show you my..." I didn't get to finish. The slap came out of nowhere, loud and sharp hot across my cheek, hard enough to make my head snap sideways and my briefcase fly out of my hand, papers bursting into the air, court documents scattering down the steps like a flock of white birds suddenly startled. For a second, the whole plaza went silent, cars still moving in the street, but the sound somehow far away, everyone looking, nobody talking. I tasted blood at the corner of my mouth, metallic and bitter. Martinez's hand hung in the air a moment longer, his face twisted like he was proud of what he'd just done. "Filthy animals like you belong in cages, not courthouses," he spat. Rodriguez laughed, pulling out his phone. "Man, you didn't have to go that hard," he said already. Recording like this was content, not violence. Thompson stepped in to get a better angle. "The world's gonna love this one, Martinez." I didn't scream, didn't cry. I just slowly lifted my gaze upward past their faces to the bronze plaque above the door I had walked through thousands of times, the one that read, "The Honorable Judge K. Williams, Courtroom 4B. My own name shining right there about 20 feet away from where I was kneeling on the hot stone. You ever have a moment where your life splits in two, the before and the after, and you can feel the line being drawn in real time? That was my line. "Turn around," he ordered, "hands behind your back." My cheek burned, my shoulder already sore, but my voice was steady when I said, "Officer, I'm not resisting. I just need to pick up my..." He yanked my arm back so hard my shoulder screamed. "Stop moving!" he shouted loud and theatrical. "You are resisting!" The cuffs dug into my wrists as the phones kept recording and the crowd kept watching and the guard kept pretending he didn't see. They walked me up the rest of the stairs like that, my own case files at our feet stamped with federal seals, including the internal affairs folder on Martinez that had kept me awake most of the night. He glanced down and smirked. "Stealing court files now, huh? You trying to fake being a lawyer?" In that moment, the irony was so heavy it almost knocked the wind out of me. Inside those same marble halls that had echoed with the sound of my heels on days I wore my robe now echoed with the clink of my cuffs. At the intake desk, another officer looked up. "What's this?" he asked. "Trespassing, possible forgery." Martinez answered, casual, bored, like this was just another Monday claims. "She works here," had a bag full of stolen documents. The intake clerk frowned. "She said she works here." "Yeah," Martinez scoffed. "Maybe she was going to file some fake lawsuit or something." Rodriguez laughed again. "Some people never learn." Nobody questioned the story. Nobody said, "I think I've seen her in a robe." Nobody even checked my ID. The power of a badge and a lie is that people get used to believing them on autopilot. They put me in a holding cell, just concrete and steel and that buzzing fluorescent light that makes everything feel a little less human. I sat there on the cold bench, feeling my cheek throb, feeling the metal biting into my skin, and my mind didn't go first to anger. It went to silence. The silence of the people on those steps. The silence of the guard. The silence that I had seen so many times whenever someone who looked like me got hurt, and everyone decided it was safer to pretend they didn't see. My thoughts drifted, not because I was checking out, but because the past and the present were suddenly sitting right next to each other. I thought about being 9 years old in Chicago watching 2 white officers throw my father against the hood of his own car, because as one of them said, "No black man drives a car like that around here." I remembered my mother's voice later that night in our small kitchen, shaking but firm. Leonard promised me Keisha won't grow up hating them, and my father, tired and bruised, saying, "I won't let her hate them, Ruth. I'll make sure she learns the law instead." That promise became my compass. It carried me through law school, through the state's attorney's office, all the way to the federal bench. I believed in the law so much that some days it almost felt like a religion. Sitting there in that cell, I realized the law hadn't stopped what happened to my father, and it hadn't stopped what just happened to me, but maybe if I stayed very clear about who I was, I could still make it answer for both. I whispered it out loud so I wouldn't forget. "My name is Judge Kesha Williams, and you are not going to erase me with one slap." When they finally pulled me out for the hearing, I walked into the courtroom in cuffs instead of robes. The walls were the same, the flag was the same, the seal on the wall was the same, but everything felt tilted, like I was looking at my life from the wrong side of the glass. Judge Harrison took the bench, older white man, decent enough, but someone who had never really had to ask himself if the system was biased because it was built with people like him in mind. Martinez took the stand, straightened his uniform, and lied under oath as easily as breathing. Talking about a combative female, a restricted entrance, minimal force, the phrases so polished you could tell he'd said them 100 times. Thompson and Rodriguez backed him up perfectly, their testimonies choreographed. My public defender, a nervous young man who had just met me, asked the court for leniency, said maybe I was confused or frightened. That was the moment I decided I was done letting other people narrate my story. I leaned toward him and said quietly, "I appreciate you, but I've got this." Then I looked up at the judge. "Your Honor, if it pleases the court, I'd like to question the officer myself." He squinted down at me, clearly annoyed. "Are you an attorney?" "I am," I said. "And more than that, but we can start there." He hesitated, then let me proceed. I stood up, chains clinking softly, and faced Martinez. "Officer, did I threaten you?" "You were aggressive," he said. "Did I have a weapon?" "No." "Did I attempt to strike you?" "No." "Did you strike me?" He shifted. "I used minimal force in response to your—" "Did you strike me?" I repeated. "Yes," he muttered. "Thank you." I turned to Judge Harrison. "Your Honor, this courthouse, including its steps, is covered in high-definition cameras. Under Brady v. Maryland, I am requesting immediate preservation of all surveillance from 8:45 to 9:15 a.m. this morning, along with any body camera footage and digital backups, because if the truth matters here, the truth is already recorded." The temperature in the room shifted. The prosecutor started to object, then saw something in my eyes that made her close her mouth. The judge frowned, rubbed his temple, then finally said, "We'll take a short recess. The request is granted." They led me back to holding, but this time I wasn't just waiting, I was planning. A few minutes later, the door opened and the bailiff, James Henderson, stepped in and just froze. "Judge Williams," he whispered, color draining from his face. "Oh my God, I didn't—" "It's all right, James," I said softly. "You weren't the one who put me in here, but I need you to help me get out the right way. Go to my chambers in the closet. There's a black robe with gold trim. Bring it and bring my gavel from the box on my desk." His eyes went wide. "You're going back in, James?" I said, standing as tall as I could in those cuffs. Justice doesn't hide in a cell. It walks back into the room and looks everyone in the eye. While he ran, my phone buzzed on the table, somehow already returned with my things. Chief Judge Margaret Carter was on the line, furious and scared. I told her what happened in about 3 sentences. There was a long pause, then she asked, "Do you want me to bring in the U.S. Attorney, the FBI, the Marshals, all of the above?" I took a breath. "Not yet." I said, "First, I want him to realize who he put his hands on in front of the same system he thought would always protect him." When James came back, he was carrying my robe like it was made of glass. I slid my arms into it, felt the fabric settle over my shoulders like armor I'd forgotten I owned, took my gavel in my hand, and for the first time since that slap, I felt the ground under me stop tilting. When we walked back into the courtroom and the bailiff called out, "All rise for the Honorable Judge Keisha Williams," you could feel the shock pass through the room like a wave, starting at the back and crashing all the way to the bench. Martinez turned, jaw-dropping, the blood draining from his face so fast he looked like someone had pulled a plug. Judge Harrison stepped aside, more than happy to get out of the line of fire. I took my seat, adjusted the microphone, and said calmly, "Officer Martinez, you may remain standing. What happened next is all over the internet. Now you can watch the footage yourself. The surveillance from the steps, the body cam backup he swore had malfunctioned, his own words playing back to him in open court. You can watch me ask him one by one to reconcile those images with the lies he told under oath. You can see the moment when everyone in that gallery realizes this is not just about one slap or one bad cop. It is about an entire pattern the system called unsubstantiated 47 times in a row. In the end, I signed the order to put him in cuffs and walk him out the same side door he'd marched so many others through. I opened the internal affairs file and read his history into the record, every complaint, every settlement, every dollar the city paid for his minimal force. I ordered reviews of his old cases, sanctions for the officers who backed his lies, referrals to federal investigators. People call that the satisfying part, the justice part, the part where the bad guy finally gets what's coming. And yeah, I won't lie, there was a certain peace in watching those cuffs close around his wrists, but that wasn't the end of the story. The real twist came months later when the investigation pulled up more names, more habits, more quiet deals, when cases started getting reopened. When officers who had always counted on silence finally had to sit in rooms and answer questions with cameras rolling. The courthouse that once felt like a machine that just processed pain started little by little to feel like a place where truth might actually have a chance to be heard. They renamed the building, eventually put my name on a plaque near the entrance, but I'll tell you the moment that meant the most to me. It wasn't the ceremony with politicians and cameras. It was a random weekday afternoon when I watched a little black boy tug on his mother's sleeve at the bottom of those same steps and ask, "Who is Judge Williams?" And his mother said, "She's the reason we can walk in here with our heads up." So here's what I want to ask you watching this wherever you are. If I hadn't been a judge, if I had been a nurse or a cashier or a teenager in a hoodie that morning, do you think this story would have ended the same way? Do you think anyone would have pulled the footage or believed me over his report or questioned the phrase minimal force at all? That's the part that keeps me up some nights. Justice at its best isn't about revenge, it's about repair, about making sure the harm stops with you and doesn't just keep rolling over the next person and the next. So tell me in the comments, honestly, do you think the system can change, or did I just get lucky because I already had a robe hanging in the closet? Have you ever seen or lived through something like this where someone was judged by their skin, their neighborhood, their clothes before anyone bothered to learn their name? Drop your story, your reaction, your anger, your hope, whatever you're carrying. Because justice doesn't get better in silence. It gets better when regular people decide they're done looking away and start standing up instead.